They say interment within a Dreadnought sarcophagus is our chapter's highest honor, the final reward for exceptional service, the chance to fight eternally in the Emperor's name. I believed this once, as they all do. Faith is strongest before the forge fire burns you. My name was Marin of Clan Rayan, brother captain of the Iron Hands. I was a warrior, a leader of men who turned flesh to iron in service to mankind. Now I am neither flesh nor truly iron. I am memory housed in metal, a revenant caught between honor and horror. The last battle I remember with perfect clarity was on Tyrannus VII, a world of ash and cinder where the sky rained molten glass. Our company deployed against a warband of word-bearers who had raised 8 cathedrals of corruption upon the plains. Each cathedral housed a dark apostle preaching blasphemy that drove the local population to madness. I remember the drop pods slamming into the ashen earth, the ramp falling away to reveal a landscape flayed by artillery, the smell of cordite and burning promethium hanging thick in the atmosphere. I led the assault against the central cathedral, my power fist crackling with killing potential as word-bearers swarmed from their unholy sanctuary. There is something perverse about fighting traitor astartes. They retain all the transhuman strength and tactical acumen of loyal space marines, but directed toward purposes that corrupt their very being. Fighting them feels like looking into a mirror crafted from nightmares. Every movement familiar yet wrong. Every tactic recognizable yet twisted. They know how we think because they once thought as we did. The word-bearer who dealt me my mortal wound was called Marduk the Faithless. He carried an axe that screamed with the voices of all it had killed. When it bit into my side, slicing through ceramite and into my enhanced organs, I felt those voices surge into me, millions of souls in torment attempting to claim mine. I killed him anyway, crushed his skull with my power fist and watched his corrupted brain matter splash across my armor. Even as my secondary heart failed and my enhanced biology struggled to compensate for catastrophic blood loss, I advanced into the cathedral. The mission parameters were clear. Destroy the source of corruption, purge the unclean. I remember placing melta charges at the structure's key junctures. I remember the satisfaction of watching it collapse as I fell to my knees, blood pooling beneath me. My brothers found me there, half buried in rubble, reciting the litany against weakness, the last words I spoke with my true voice. The flesh is weak, but my resolve is iron. Then darkness. A darkness I assumed was death. I was wrong. Death would have been clean. This was merely transition. I awoke to new awareness. At first, I could not understand what had happened. My vision was altered, enhanced in some ways, diminished in others. I could see with perfect clarity for several kilometers, but could not turn my head to look to my sides without shifting my entire body. I could hear the voices of my brothers, but they seemed to come from very far away, or through thick walls, no matter how close they stood. The sensation of my limbs was wrong. When I attempted to move my fingers, massive armored gauntlets responded instead. When I tried to feel my heartbeat, there was only the thrum of powerful engines. Most disturbing of all, I could not feel pain, nor hunger, nor exhaustion. I could not feel the reassuring discipline of my enhanced physiology working to keep me alive. It took time to understand fully what had occurred. I was no longer housed in the body the Emperor had seen fit to enhance through his divine technology. I was interred within the armored sarcophagus of a Dreadnought. My shattered mortal form was suspended in amniotic fluid, connected to the war machine through a network of neural interfaces and life support systems. Brother Captain Marin has been deemed worthy of continued service, said Tech Marine Audriel as he performed calibrations on my systems. You are reborn in iron as the Primarch intended. A great honor. The word echoed strangely in my consciousness. At first, I believed it truly was a blessing, a chance to continue serving the Emperor and my chapter. The Iron Hands value strength above all things, and what could be stronger than a warrior freed from the weakness of flesh? My new form was powerful beyond measure. Where once I carried a power fist and bolt pistol, I now wielded a massive power fist capable of crushing battle tanks and a heavy flamer that could purge entire squads of enemies in seconds. My armor was adamantium, meters thick. My targeting systems could track dozens of enemies simultaneously. My strength was that of the machine. Relentless, tireless, overwhelming. Tech Marine Audriel explained the systems to me during those first days. How my organic brain was now connected directly to the Dreadnought's machine spirit. How my thoughts could control weapon systems with precision impossible for a normal astartes. how my enhanced organs, though damaged beyond repair for conventional service, could be sustained indefinitely within the sarcophagus. "You will fight forever. Ancient One," he said with what I thought was reverence. "You will witness victories across centuries. You will become a living legend of the chapter." I did not understand then what he truly meant, what forever would actually entail. My first battle after interment was against orc forces on Helios Minoris. I remember the exhilaration of striding through enemy fire that would have killed an astartes in power armor. Rounds pinged harmlessly off my adamantium hull. Crude orc explosives detonated against me with little effect. I waded into their green tide and broke them like waves against a cliff. The orc warboss was a massive brute, covered in crude cybernetics and wielding a power claw that crackled with stolen imperial technology. He roared a challenge as I approached, his boys forming a crude circle around us. The other orcs wanted to see their boss fight, wanted to witness what they thought would be his greatest victory. I gave them a different show. The warboss swung his claw at me with savage strength. It connected with my hull, scoring the adamantium but doing no real damage. I responded with my power fist, the blow catching him in his crude armor. Ceramite and metal buckled. The warboss staggered but came back swinging, roaring defiance. We traded blows for several minutes, each of his strikes glancing off my armor, each of mine crushing deeper into his body. Finally, I caught him with an uppercut that lifted his massive frame off the ground. When he crashed back down, I brought my foot down on his skull. The crunch was audible even over the din of battle. The surrounding orcs broke immediately. Without their warboss, their crude discipline shattered. My brothers surged forward, cutting them down as they fled. My heavy flamer reduced the warboss's bodyguard to ash in seconds. My brothers cheered. They banged their fists against their chest plates in salute to my victory. I felt pride then. Purpose. The satisfaction of a battle won, an enemy defeated, brothers saved by my strength. But there were signs of what was to come. Early warnings I failed to heed. After the battle, the other astartes returned to the strike cruiser. They removed their armor in the armoring chambers, servitors assisting with the ritual of disassembly. They ate in the feasting hall, consuming the nutrient-rich paste that sustained their enhanced metabolisms while sharing tales of the day's glories. I had done this countless times as a captain, those moments of brotherhood after battle where bonds were strengthened and lessons learned. They trained in the practice cages, honing their skills further. Brother against brother in controlled combat, pushing each other to greater heights of martial excellence. They prayed in the ship's chapel, reaffirming their devotion to the Emperor and the Primarch, seeking strength from their faith for battles to come. I did none of these things. I could not remove my armor because I had no armor to remove. The Dreadnought hull was my body now. I could not eat because my organic components received sustenance through tubes and chemical processes I could not control or even feel. I could not train because there were no practice cages designed for a Dreadnought, no way to spar without risking serious damage to my brothers or the ship itself. I could not kneel in the chapel because my massive form would not fit through its doors. Instead, I was taken to the hangar bay, where tech marines performed maintenance on my systems. They spoke about me rather than to me as they worked, discussing oil pressure and weapon calibrations and coolant levels as if I were merely another piece of equipment. Another war machine in the chapter's vast arsenal. No different from a Land Raider or a Thunderhawk. Hydraulic pressure in the left leg assembly is running 0.3% below optimal, one said, reading from a data slate. Noted. Adjusting compensators, replied another. Accessing a panel in my leg I couldn't even feel. Heavy flamer promethium reserves at 73%. Should we refuel now or wait until after the next deployment? Wait, the Ancient One performed admirably. No need to waste time on non-critical maintenance. They discussed me in the third person as if I weren't there, as if I couldn't hear every word. As if my consciousness, my awareness, my very self didn't matter, only the war machine that housed it. When the maintenance was complete, they activated my suspension protocols. I didn't know what this meant at first. I assumed it was something like sleep, a period of rest and recovery like the meditation cycles I had practiced as a captain. I was wrong. One moment I was aware, conscious, experiencing the hangar bay around me. The next moment, nothing, not darkness, not unconsciousness, not sleep, simply nothing. It wasn't like closing your eyes and drifting off. There was no transition, no gradual fading. It was as if someone had reached into my mind and flipped a switch. Awareness on, Awareness off. This is the first truth of Dreadnought existence that no one tells the initiates. Between battles, we cease to be. When awareness returned, it came with the same jarring suddenness. One moment nothing, the next moment full consciousness. No dreams to remember. No sense of time passing. It was as if no time had passed at all. As if the moment of suspension and the moment of reactivation were the same moment. But I quickly realized something was wrong. The hangar bay looked different. Subtle changes I couldn't quite identify at first. The arrangement of equipment had shifted. The markings on the walls seemed to use slightly different iconography. Even the tech marines performing my reactivation procedures wore armor I didn't recognize. Systems optimal, one said, running through diagnostics. Weapons charged. Ammunition loaded. The Ancient One is ready for deployment. What is our target? I asked, my vox emitter crackling slightly. Something felt off about my voice, though I couldn't identify what. The tech marine looked up at me, surprise evident even through his helmet. You speak, Ancient One. The records indicated minimal communication during previous deployments. Previous deployments? I had only fought once since my interment. What was he talking about? I asked about our target. I repeated. Eldar raiders have struck at the agri-world of Talisar Prime. We deploy within the hour to drive them back. Eldar, not orcs. The orc campaign on Helios Minoris had ended with their complete defeat. There had been no mention of Eldar threats when I was suspended. What had happened in the time between? How long was I in suspension? I asked. The tech marine consulted his data slate. Approximately 6 weeks, Ancient One. Standard rotation protocol. 6 weeks. 6 weeks had passed in what felt like no time at all. 6 weeks during which my brothers had lived, fought, trained, ate, slept, prayed, experienced life in all its fullness. 6 weeks of which I had experienced nothing. Not even dreams. The implications began to sink in. This was how my existence would be now. Brief periods of consciousness during combat. Separated by voids of non-existence. No life between battles. No experience beyond war. Just violence, then nothing, then violence again. The battle against the Eldar was brutal. They were faster than the orcs, more cunning, wielding technology that seemed almost magical in its sophistication. Their anti-grav skimmers danced around our slower-moving forces. Their shuriken weapons could tear through power armor with contemptuous ease. Their aspect warriors fought with a grace and precision that made them deadly opponents even for astartes. But I was not an astartes anymore. I was something more and something less. A squad of striking scorpions, Eldar aspect warriors specializing in close combat, attempted to flank our position. They moved with inhuman speed, their powered mandiblasters crackling as they closed. They would have torn through a tactical squad in seconds. They barely scratched my hull. My heavy flamer swung toward them, promethium igniting in a purifying arc. The Eldar tried to dodge, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to move faster than any human. But my targeting systems had already calculated their evasive patterns. The flames caught them mid-leap, transforming their graceful warriors into screaming torches. An Eldar Falcon grav tank attempted to flank me, its bright lance charging with barely contained energy. The weapon could have punched through my armor if it hit true, but I was already moving, my bulk surprising in its speed. My power fist connected with the tank's side, the disruption field shattering its anti-grav generators. It crashed to the ground and I brought my foot down on its crew compartment. The battle raged for hours. My brothers fought with the disciplined fury I remembered, their bolters barking death, their chainswords roaring. But I noticed differences from the orc campaign. Small things. The way they coordinated seemed more refined, more practiced. They moved as if they had fought together for months, not weeks, because they had. 6 weeks was a long time for astartes. 6 weeks of training, of bonding, of growing as a unit. 6 weeks I had missed entirely. When the Eldar finally withdrew, their raid broken and their casualties unsustainable, I found myself standing amid the carnage, covered in alien blood and the scorch marks of their exotic weapons. My brothers celebrated another victory. I felt empty. After the battle, the same routine. Maintenance in the hangar bay. Tech marines discussing my performance in clinical terms. Then suspension protocols, awareness off. Awareness on data, different battle. Different enemies. Chaos cultists this time. Corrupted humans who had turned from the Emperor's light. Weak individually but dangerous in numbers, especially when supported by the powers of the warp. The battle ended. Maintenance, suspension, Awareness off, awareness on. Tyranids this time. Nightmarish bio-engineered killing machines. Directed by a hive mind of terrifying intelligence. I waded through them like a farmer through wheat, my weapons reaping a terrible toll. Battle, maintenance, suspension. The pattern became clear. This was my existence now. Brief flashes of consciousness during combat, separated by voids of nothing. No life between the violence, no experience beyond killing. I began to notice larger changes between awakenings, not just the subtle shifts of weeks or months, but more significant alterations. New equipment patterns, different company markings, faces I didn't recognize among my brothers after what I thought was perhaps my 10th battle. Though I had no way of knowing for certain, I asked a tech marine a question that had been building in my mind. Who commands the 5th company now? The young tech marine looked up from his work, confusion evident. Brother Captain Vortigern, Ancient One. Vortigern. I didn't know this name. What became of Brother Captain Sayax? The tech marine paused, his confusion deepening. Brother Captain Sayax? I'm not familiar with that name, Ancient One. Let me check the records. He consulted his data slate, scrolling through files. When he looked up, his expression had changed. There was something in his bearing now. Was it pity? Discomfort? Ancient One, according to chapter records, Brother Captain Sayax fell in glory during the purge of Manticore. His gene seed was recovered and has since produced 17 new battle brothers. When did this occur? The tech marine hesitated. 200 years ago, Ancient One. The words hit me like a physical blow. My weapon systems actually fluctuated, power surging briefly before I regained control. 200 years. 2 centuries had passed without my knowledge or awareness. 200 years of chapter history, of campaigns and battles, of victories and defeats. 200 years during which the brother who had succeeded me had lived an entire career, had led the 5th company through countless battles, had died honorably in service to the Emperor, and I had experienced none of it. I tried to calculate how many battles I had fought. 10, 20? Certainly no more than that. Perhaps a year's worth of actual combat, spread across 2 centuries. The rest, but nothing. Void, non-existence. How long have I served as a Dreadnought? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The tech marine checked his records again. You were interred 473 standard years ago, Ancient One. Nearly 5 centuries. 500 years had passed since I fell on Tyrannus 7. 500 years during which I had experienced perhaps a few months of consciousness at most. 500 years of human history, of chapter evolution, of galactic events, all of which had occurred without my knowledge or participation. Everyone I had known in my previous life was dead. Not just dead, long dead. Their gene seed had been recovered, implanted in new aspirants who had themselves likely lived and died in the centuries since. I was a relic from an age so distant it might as well be mythology. And how long? I asked, my artificial voice betraying no emotion though my thoughts were in turmoil. Do dreadnoughts typically serve? The tech marine's response chilled whatever remained of my soul. The oldest dreadnought in service to the adeptus astartes is Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves. He has been fighting for over 10,000 years since the time of the Horus heresy itself. 10,000 years. An eternity spent as a weapon to be used and stored away. An eternity without true brotherhood, without purpose beyond killing. An eternity trapped in a metal shell, with only fragments of memory to remind you that you were once human, once alive, once something more than a tool of war. As the suspension protocols engaged, I tried to cry out, to protest, to beg for true death instead of this half-life. But the systems were already shutting down, my consciousness already fading into the void. My last coherent thought before the darkness claimed me, is this honor? Or is this hell? Awareness on. This time, when consciousness returned, I immediately knew something was different. The hangar bay where I was stored looked nothing like what I remembered. The architecture was similar, but the details had changed significantly. More advanced equipment, different organizational systems. Even the armor worn by the tech marines had evolved into patterns I didn't recognize. Ancient One awakens, said a tech marine, his voice processed through his armor's Vox system in a way that sounded more mechanical than human. All systems showing optimal parameters. The Venerable One is ready for deployment. Venerable One. They called me that now. Not Brother Captain, not even just Ancient One. Venerable One. a title reserved for the oldest, most revered members of the chapter. How much time had passed since my last awakening? We were deploying against an enemy I had never encountered before, the Tau, a xeno species that had somehow arisen during my long sleep, building an interstellar empire on the eastern fringe. The briefing I received was clinical, delivered by a tech marine who seemed to assume I already knew the basics. The Tau rely on advanced ranged weaponry and battlesuits, he explained, highlighting tactical data on a hololithic display. Their fire-cast warriors are well-trained but physically inferior to astartes. However, their technology compensates for this weakness. Their railguns can pierce our armor at significant range. Their plasma weapons are more advanced than our own, and their battlesuits provide them with mobility and firepower that makes them dangerous opponents. I processed this information, comparing it to my understanding of the galaxy from my previous life. An entirely new xeno species, advanced enough to pose a threat to the Imperium. How long had I been sleeping for such a thing to occur? The battle itself was unlike anything I had experienced before. The Tau refused to engage in close combat, using their superior range and mobility to strike from distance. Their fire warriors moved in disciplined formations, laying down precise volleys of pulse fire. Their crisis battlesuits jetted across the battlefield, appearing from unexpected angles to deliver devastating strikes before jumping away. It was frustrating. My weapons were designed for closer engagement. My heavy flamer was useless beyond a few dozen meters. My power fist could crush anything it touched, but I had to reach my enemies first. The Tau's entire tactical doctrine seemed designed to prevent exactly that. But I was patient. I had learned patience over centuries of war, even if I had experienced those centuries in fragments. I coordinated with my brothers, using them to drive the Tau toward me, to force them into ranges where my weapons could reach. When a crisis battlesuit made the mistake of landing too close, thinking itself safe from my lumbering form, I demonstrated why assumptions are dangerous in war. My targeting systems locked onto it the instant it materialized. My heavy flamer discharged before it could jet away. The pilot's screams were brief as the Prometheum did its work. The battle raged for days. Real, continuous days, not the brief engagements I had become accustomed to. The Tau threat was significant enough that the chapter kept all available assets active, including dreadnoughts. This meant I remained conscious far longer than usual, experiencing time in a way I hadn't since my interment. It was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I could feel the flow of time again, experience something approaching normal consciousness. A curse because it meant I could observe my brothers more closely, and what I saw disturbed me deeply. During a lull in the fighting, as we held a defensive position against expected Tau counterattacks, I watched the astartes around me. They moved efficiently, precisely, but with something missing. The warrior poetry I remembered, the subtle acknowledgments between brothers, the shared understanding that came from fighting side by side, seemed diminished. One brother, a tactical marine whose name I learned was Talion, had replaced his left arm with a bionic augmetic, despite the fact that his original arm appeared to have been perfectly functional. When I asked him about it, his response was matter of fact. The flesh is weak, Ancient One. The augmetic is stronger, faster, more reliable. Why would I keep an inferior organic limb when a superior mechanical one is available? Because it was part of you, I replied. Because it was crafted by the Emperor's own genetic genius. Because your flesh is not weak. It is enhanced beyond normal human capacity. Talion's expression showed no emotion. With respect, Ancient One, that is outdated thinking. The Primarch taught us to overcome the weakness of flesh. We honor his memory by embracing the strength of iron. I wanted to argue, to explain that Ferrus Manus had never intended his sons to reject their humanity entirely. But Talion had already moved away, returning to his post with mechanical precision. During this same extended period of consciousness, I encountered another dreadnought for the first time since my interment. He was from a different chapter, a blood angel whose red hull was adorned with golden scrollwork depicting scenes of martyrdom and glory. His name, or the name he went by now, was Brother Dante. We were positioned together, providing heavy fire support while our respective companies maneuvered against a Tau strongpoint. During a brief lull in the fighting, Brother Dante spoke over a private Vox channel. "You are recently awakened, Iron Hand?" "Recently enough," I replied, "though time has lost much meaning for me." "How long have you served?" "Nearly 5 centuries, I am told." There was a sound from his Vox that might have been a laugh. "Still fresh, then? Still remembering your flesh life with clarity? Yes? Does that fade?" "Everything fades, brother. Everything except duty. Except war." His tone was not bitter, just factual, resigned. "I was interred after the Battle of Macan, 1,947 years ago. Nearly 2,000 years. This warrior had been fighting longer than some civilizations had existed. What must that be like? What remained of the man who had once worn flesh?" "Do you remember your name?" I asked. "The name you had before?" Another pause. "Sometimes, in fragments, like trying to recall a dream long after waking. I remember. I remember the face of my Primarch. I remember standing in his presence, feeling the golden radiance of his being. Or do I remember it? Or have I merely been told of it so many times that I've constructed a false memory?" His words resonated with my own growing fears. How much of what I remembered was truly my own experience? How much had been altered by time and the strange existence I now endured? "We fight because it is all that remains to us," Brother Dante continued. "We fight because without war we have no purpose. We fight because in those moments of battle, when our weapons roar and our enemies fall, we can almost remember what it meant to be alive. Truly alive. Not this half-existence we endure." "Is that enough?" I asked. "Is duty alone sufficient reason to endure?" "It must be." He replied simply, "It is all we have left." The conversation haunted me for the remainder of the campaign. Brother Dante's words, spoken with such certainty, such resignation, felt like a glimpse into my own future. Centuries more of this existence, until my own memories faded to uncertain fragments. Until I too existed only for war. When the Tau were finally driven from the world, when their last strong points had been reduced to rubble and their survivors fled into space, I was prepared for the familiar routine. Maintenance. Suspension. The void. But something different happened. As the Tech Marines were preparing me for suspension, one of them, a young warrior named Dion, spoke to me directly, rather than about me. "Ancient One," he said, his voice carrying a note of something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Curiosity? Concern? Your combat performance during this campaign was exemplary, but your systems show signs of stress beyond normal combat parameters. Have you been experiencing any irregularities?" "Define irregularities," I replied, curious about what he had detected. "Unusual thought patterns, excessive processing of non-tactical data, extended periods of what appears to be reflection." I would have laughed if my Vox emitter could produce such a sound. "You describe not irregularities, Tech Marine, but the natural condition of a being who still remembers what it meant to be human." Dion paused in his work, actually looking up at my armored hull rather than at his instruments. "The chapter teaches that such reflections are inefficient, that they detract from combat effectiveness." "And what do you believe?" He resumed his work, but I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. "I believe there is wisdom in the past that we abandon at our peril. The Omnissiah teaches that understanding comes through knowledge of what has been, what is, and what may be. To ignore any of these is to court ignorance. A dangerous position to hold in the current chapter. All worthy positions carry risk, Ancient One." He moved to my weapon systems, beginning the ritualized maintenance that would prepare them for storage. "There are those among us who study the old ways, who believe that in our drive to eliminate weakness, we may have discarded strengths as well." This was new. In all my awakenings, I had never encountered an Iron Hand who questioned the chapter's current path. I found myself intrigued. "Tell me, Tech Marine Dion, How long ago was I interred? He consulted his data slate. According to chapter records, 723 standard years. 7 centuries. Nearly 2.5 more than the last time I had asked. Brother Captain Sayax was now a distant memory, his successors having lived and died in the interim. The chapter had continued, evolved, changed, and I had missed almost all of it. And in those 7 centuries, how much time have I spent conscious? Dion's fingers moved across his data slate, calculating. Based on activation records and average combat duration, approximately 4 months, Ancient One. 4 months of consciousness across 7 centuries. The ratio was staggering, horrifying. I had experienced roughly 1 day for every 63 that had passed. Time was slipping away and I was powerless to stop it. Tech Marine Dion, I said before he could activate the suspension protocols. You spoke of studying the old ways. What have you learned? He glanced around, ensuring we were not observed. I have learned that the chapter was not always as it is now. That once we balanced our augmentation with humanity, that Ferrus Manus himself, despite his silver hands, despite his mastery of technology, remained fundamentally human in his outlook and his care for his sons. How did you learn this? Such teachings are not part of current doctrine. The archives go deep, Ancient One, and some of us have access to records others do not. Records from the Great Crusade. From before, and he trailed off. Before the Primarch's death, I finished for him. Yes, his loss changed us. Some say it broke something in the chapter's spirit. We embraced augmentation not as a tool to enhance our humanity, but as a way to distance ourselves from the pain of mortality. And over time, that distance grew until we forgot what we were distancing ourselves from. It was the most heretical thing I had heard an Iron Hand say in all my centuries of service. It was also the most honest. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you remember, Ancient One. You remember a time before the current doctrine took hold. Your perspective spans centuries. Your wisdom could guide us if you were willing to share it. Before I could respond, another Tech Marine approached. Dion immediately fell silent, returning to his maintenance tasks with professional efficiency. But his words had given me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not for myself. I had long since accepted my fate. But hope that perhaps the chapter itself might find its way back to balance, that the wisdom of the past might yet illuminate the future. As the suspension protocols finally activated, I held on to that hope. It was something to cling to in the approaching void, something to remember when consciousness returned. Awareness on. This time, the awakening was different. There was no gradual reactivation, no careful preparation. My systems came online with jarring suddenness, warning runes flashing across my vision, weapon systems powering up automatically. I was in a storage vault deep within what I recognized as a chapter fortress monastery on Medusa itself. Around me stood other dreadnoughts in various states of readiness. Some were already fully active, their weapons tracking potential threats. Others were still in the process of awakening, their systems coming online one by one. Alarms blared through the massive chamber. The distant thunder of explosions reverberated through the stone floor. We were under attack. A Tech Marine, not Dion, someone I didn't recognize, rushed toward us, his armor scorched and damaged. Venerable brothers, he shouted over the din. The fortress is under assault. All combat assets are being deployed to defensive positions. What enemy do we face? Demanded one of the other dreadnoughts, an ancient contemptor pattern whose decorations suggested he had served even longer than I. Tyranids, Ancient Ones. A splinter fleet has reached Medusa. They're attacking in numbers we've never seen before. Tyranids on Medusa, the chapter's homeworld, under attack by the Great Devourer. How had this happened? How had the void defenses, the orbital platforms, the fleet itself allowed Xenos to reach the surface? There was no time for questions. The massive doors to the vault were already opening, revealing a scene of desperate battle. Iron Hands were fighting in the corridors beyond, their bolters roaring, their chainswords whining. But they were being pressed back step by a tide of chitin-armored monstrosities. I had fought Tyranids before in previous awakenings, but never in numbers like this, never with such variety and coordination. Hormagaunts swarmed forward in living waves, their scything talons reaching for any weakness. Termagants provided covering fire with their flesh-boring weapons. Tyranid warriors directed the swarm with cold intelligence, their psychic commands coordinating attacks with brutal efficiency. And behind them, Looming in the smoke and darkness, I could see larger forms. Carnifexes, hive tyrants, living engines of destruction that could tear through even a dreadnought's armor with enough time. We advanced into the chaos. I found myself fighting alongside 3 other dreadnoughts, forming a wall of adamantium and firepower that the Tyranids broke against like ocean waves against rock. My heavy flamer swept back and forth, turning hormagaunts into screaming torches. My power fist crushed warriors and carnifexes alike, each blow accompanied by the satisfying crunch of breaking chitin. But for every Xenos we killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Tyranid hive fleet had committed massive resources to this attack, and they were learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics with frightening speed. During a brief lull in the fighting, as the Tyranids regrouped for another push, I found myself standing beside the contemptor-patterned dreadnought who had spoken earlier. "Brother," I said over a private Vox channel.
"How long was I in suspension before this awakening?"
The ancient warrior was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of unimaginable age. "Does it matter, young one? Time has lost all meaning for us. We wake, we fight, we sleep. The cycles blur together until there is no past, no future, only the eternal present of war." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I need to understand how much time has passed." "Very well. According to the tactical briefing I received, the current year is 997 M41. When were you interred?" I calculated quickly. If the current year is 997 M41, then I have served for nearly 1,000 years, a full millennium. 10 centuries had passed since I fell on Tyrannus 7. 10 centuries during which empires had risen and fallen, during which billions had lived and died, during which the galaxy itself had shifted and changed, and I had experienced perhaps a year of it at most. 1,000 years is nothing, the ancient contemptor replied. I was interred during the Horus heresy itself. I have fought for over 10,000 years. I remember when the Emperor still walked among us. Or at least I think I do. Sometimes I wonder if my memories are real, or if they are merely data ghosts, fragments of other warriors who occupied this sarcophagus before me. Before I could process this disturbing revelation, the Tyranids attacked again. This time they came with even greater numbers, and behind them lumbered something I had never seen before. A bio-titan, a living creature the size of a building, covered in weapons that were part of its very biology. The battle that followed was the most intense I had ever experienced. The bio-titan's weapons tore through our defensive lines with contemptuous ease. Its bioplasma struck one of the dreadnoughts beside me, melting through his armor plating and cooking the warrior inside. His death screams lasted only seconds before his sarcophagus ruptured entirely. I charged the monstrosity, knowing that my heavy flamer would be useless against something so massive, but hoping my power fist could do enough damage to slow it down. Around me, iron hands poured fire into the creature, their bolters finding weak points in its armor, their plasma guns burning through its flesh. The bio-titan noticed me and swung one of its massive claws in my direction. I ducked under it as much as a dreadnought can duck, and drove my power fist into what I hoped was a vital organ. The disruption field crackled, and I felt the satisfying sensation of tearing through flesh and bone. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very stones of the fortress. It tried to shake me off, but I held on, driving my fist deeper, climbing up its body like a warrior scaling a fortress wall. My brothers saw what I was attempting and redoubled their fire, keeping the smaller Tyranids away from me. When I reached the creature's head, I drove my power fist into what passed for its brain. The bio-titan shuddered, stumbled, and then collapsed like a felled tree. I wrote it down, the impact jarring every system in my body, but I had no time to celebrate. More Tyranids were already swarming toward me, eager to avenge their fallen behemoth. I stood atop the corpse and became a fortress myself, my weapons roaring death in all directions. The battle raged for what felt like days. In truth, it might have been days. I had no way to track time in the chaos of continuous combat. But eventually the Tyranid assault began to waver. Our reinforcements arrived, fresh companies of Iron Hands who had been deployed elsewhere on Medusa, along with armor support and even titans from the adeptus mechanicus forges. The Xenos were driven back, pushed off the fortress and eventually off Medusa entirely. The Hive fleet's attack had been repulsed, though at terrible cost. I saw the bodies of my brothers scattered across the battlefield, their armor broken, their gene seed hopefully recovered for future generations. After the battle, as Tech Marines began assessing the damage and performing emergency repairs on surviving war machines, I noticed something that had eluded me in the heat of combat. Many of the Iron Hands I had fought alongside were more machine than man, not just augmented but extensively rebuilt with bionics. One warrior I saw had replaced both legs, one arm, his entire respiratory system, and parts of his skull with mechanical components. He moved with perfect efficiency, but there was something uncanny about him, something that made him seem more like a servitor than a space marine. I was approached by an astartes captain whose armor was so heavily modified that I could barely see any of the original ceramite. Where his face should have been visible through his helmet, I saw instead an array of augmetic sensors and targeting systems. His voice, when he spoke, was completely synthesized. "Venerable One, your combat performance was exemplary. You destroyed a Biotitan single-handedly and held the Eastern Breach Point for over 17 hours. The Iron Council wishes to commend your service." "Captain," I said, trying to keep the concern from my voice, "I notice many of our brothers have embraced extensive augmentation. Is this now standard practice?" "Standard? No, but encouraged. The flesh is weak, Ancient One. You, of all warriors, should understand this. You exist as you do because your flesh failed you. We seek to prevent such failures before they occur. My flesh did not fail me, Captain. It was wounded in battle against a superior enemy while I was accomplishing my mission objectives. That is not failure, that is the price of service." The captain's augmetic eyes focused on me with uncomfortable intensity. "An interesting perspective, Ancient One. Perhaps your extended periods of suspension have preserved a more traditional viewpoint. The chapter has evolved much in the millennia since your interment." "Evolved? Or strayed from our founding principles?" There was a long pause. Around us, other Iron Hands had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to our conversation. I realized I might have gone too far, questioned too openly. "The Primarch taught us that the flesh is weak," the captain said, his synthesized voice carrying no emotion. "We honor his memory by overcoming that weakness. If you question this, perhaps you question the Primarch himself." "I question nothing about Ferrus Manus," I replied carefully. "I question only whether we truly understand what he meant. He augmented himself to better serve humanity, not to abandon it. He replaced his hands with living metal, yes, but the rest of him remained flesh and blood. He felt pain, joy, anger, brotherhood. He was still human, despite his enhancements." "And where did his humanity get him?" The captain shot back. "Dead on Istvan V, killed by a traitor brother. If he had been more machine, less flesh, perhaps he would have survived." The heresy of the statement shocked me. To suggest that the Primarch's death was due to insufficient augmentation, rather than the treachery of Fulgrim, was to misunderstand everything about the drop site massacre. But before I could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Captain Carden, your presence is required at the command center. Strategic planning for system-wide defense is commencing." I looked at the new arrival, a Tech Marine, and with a shock of recognition I saw it was Dion. He had aged, his armor showing signs of extensive service, but it was unmistakably him. "Tech Marine," Carden acknowledged. "We will continue this discussion later. Ancient One, your perspective, while archaic, may have value." He turned and strode away, his movements precise and mechanical. When we were relatively alone, Dion approached me. "Ancient One, I see you have been awake long enough to observe the chapter's current state." "How long has it been since we last spoke, Dion?" "By the Imperial calendar, 274 years for you, a single period of suspension, nearly 3 more centuries lost to the void. And yet Dion was still here, still alive. Space Marines could live for centuries, but even they were not immortal to time. You've aged well, Tech Marine. I have been fortunate, and I have been careful not to draw the ire of those who would see my research as heretical." He began running diagnostic scans on my systems, speaking quietly as he worked. "Much has changed in the time since we last spoke, Ancient One. The faction I mentioned, those who study the old ways, has grown. But so has opposition to it. The chapter is divided, though few speak of it openly. Divided over what? The extent of augmentation? Over what it means to be an Iron Hand. Over whether we honor the Primarch by becoming machines or by remaining human despite our enhancements. It is a philosophical question that has practical implications. Those who embrace extensive augmentation are favored for leadership positions. Those who question it are viewed with suspicion. And you? Where do you stand? Dion was quiet for a moment, his hands continuing their work on my systems. I stand with those who believe we have lost our way. That in our grief over the Primarch's death, we have confused strength with the absence of weakness. That we have forgotten what we fight for, humanity, in our rush to distance ourselves from it. Dangerous words, Tech Marine? Perhaps, but you are proof that such thoughts have merit. You have fought for a millennium. You have served longer than most of the chapter's current leadership has been alive, and yet you still question, still reflect, still maintain some connection to your humanity despite existing in a metal shell. If anyone should have become a soulless machine, it should be you. Instead, you remain more human than many who still walk in flesh. His words struck something deep within me. For centuries, I had felt like an aberration, a relic whose thoughts and concerns were outdated. To hear someone suggest that my perspective had value, that my retention of humanity was a strength rather than a weakness, it was almost overwhelming. What would you have me do, Dion? Survive, Ancient One, bear witness, and when the time is right, speak truth to those who need to hear it. Your words carry weight that mine never could. You are a living connection to the chapter's past. Use that connection to illuminate the path forward. Before I could respond, alarm klaxons began blaring once again. The Tyranids, it seemed, were attempting another assault. We will speak more after this battle, Dion said, stepping back. For now, the chapter needs its weapons ready. Weapons. That's what I was, ultimately. A weapon to be maintained and deployed. But Dion's words suggested I could be something more. A voice, a witness, a bridge between past and future. I resolved to survive this battle and as many more as it took. Not just for duty's sake, but for purpose. The battle against the Tyranids lasted another 2 weeks of continuous combat, before the Hive fleet was finally driven from Medusa's system. I remained conscious throughout, my systems pushed to their limits but never suspended. It was the longest continuous period of awareness I had experienced since my interment, and it gave me an opportunity to observe the chapter in ways normally denied to me. What I saw confirmed Dion's words. The Iron Hands were divided, though the division was subtle, hidden beneath layers of military discipline and shared purpose. But in the quiet moments between battles, in the way brothers interacted or didn't, in the choices they made regarding augmentation and tactics, the split was there. Some embraced cold logic above all else. They spoke in clipped binary when standard Gothic would suffice. They made tactical decisions based purely on numerical calculations, treating their battle brothers as assets to be expended for optimal outcomes. They viewed civilians as resources or obstacles with no inherent value beyond their utility to the Imperium. Others, fewer in number but present, retained more of what I considered humanity. They still spoke of honor and brotherhood. They made tactical decisions that accounted for morale and loyalty, not just efficiency. They saw civilians as what they truly were, the people we had sworn to protect, the reason for our existence. When the Tyranid threat was finally ended and the fleet was deployed elsewhere, I expected suspension. Instead, I was loaded onto a strike cruiser alongside 2 other dreadnoughts for immediate redeployment. Another war? I asked the Tech Marine overseeing the loading process. The word-bearers have emerged from the warp in the Kinethion sector, he replied. A major incursion led by a dark apostle. All available chapter assets are being committed. Word-bearers, the traitors who had nearly killed me on Tyrannus 7 a millennium ago. There was a certain poetry in facing them again. The 2 dreadnoughts I was deploying with were strangers to me, though one bore markings suggesting he had served in the first company at some point in his past. As our drop pod screamed through the atmosphere toward the embattled world below, I opened a Vox channel to my companions. Brothers, I am Marin of Clan Ran, formerly captain of the 5th Company. I am Thanatar, replied the 1st Company dreadnought, once of Clan Averni. I have served for 8 centuries. The 3rd dreadnought was slower to respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was hesitant, uncertain. They call me Venerable Brother Kratax now. I remember being Sergeant Kratax once, 300 years ago. Or was it 400? The archives say I was interred after the Battle of Shale. Do you remember your life before? Sometimes, I replied. In fragments. But yes, I remember. I envy you, Kratax said quietly. My memories fade like morning mist. Sometimes I can barely recall my own name, let alone the face I once wore. A remembrancer once told me I had a brother who also served the chapter. I cannot remember his name. I cannot remember his face. Sometimes I wonder if he ever existed at all, or if it's just a phantom memory created by my damaged mind to fill the void. Thanatar's vox emitter produced a sound like a sigh. The memories fade, brothers. All except war. War remains when all else is lost to time. I can tell you every detail of battles fought centuries ago, the exact number of enemies killed, the precise angle of their approach. But I cannot tell you my father's name, cannot recall my homeworld's sky, cannot remember the face of the woman who birthed me. His words sent a chill through my consciousness. Was this my future? To lose everything except the capacity for violence? To become a machine in truth, not just in form? The drop pod slammed into the planet's surface with bone-jarring force. The assault ramp dropped, revealing a landscape of nightmare. What had once been a prosperous imperial city had been transformed by the corrupting influence of chaos. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes, their architecture defying logic and sanity. Streets flowed with substances that were neither liquid nor solid, things that seemed to writhe with malevolent awareness. The sky above was torn open, revealing the swirling madness of the warp itself. We advanced into this hellscape, our weapons bringing death to the corrupted cultists who swarmed from distorted buildings. Behind us came tactical squads of Iron Hands, their movements precisely coordinated, their augmented enhancements gleaming in the unnatural light. The enemy we faced was indeed the Word-bearers, supported by demons they had summoned through blasphemous rituals. The traitors fought with the tactical acumen of astartes combined with the fanaticism of true believers. They used the corrupted civilian population as shields and distractions, while their true forces maneuvered for advantage. I recognized their tactics. The Word-bearers had not changed in the Millennium since I had last fought them. There was something almost comforting in that consistency, when so much else had become unrecognizable. The battle flowed through the twisted city, each block taken at great cost. The Iron Hands advanced with methodical precision, unmoved by the horrors arrayed against them. I provided heavy support, my weapons cutting down enemy after enemy, my armored bulk serving as mobile cover for my lighter-armed brothers. During a momentary lull in the fighting, as tactical squads reloaded and prepared to advance into a corrupted cathedral, I noticed a small group of civilians huddled in the ruins of what had once been a hab block. They were untainted by chaos, somehow having survived the warband's arrival intact. Among them was a child, no more than 6 standard years old, clutching a ragged stuffed animal. The child looked up at me with wide, fearful eyes. To him, I must have appeared as monstrous as the enemy we fought, a massive war machine bristling with weapons, covered in the blood and viscera of countless enemies. Something stirred within whatever remained of my soul. A memory of what it meant to be human, of what we fought to protect. Not abstract concepts like the Imperium or humanity, but this, a child, frightened but alive, clutching a toy as if it could ward off the darkness. I lowered my vox emitter to its softest setting. "Be not afraid, child. The Emperor protects." The child continued to stare, neither fleeing nor approaching. There was something in those eyes, a spark of recognition perhaps, an understanding that despite my monstrous appearance I was there to help. One of the Iron Hands tactical marines noticed my attention had shifted. He approached, his helm turning to regard the civilians. "Venerable one, these civilians are an inefficiency. They should be eliminated to deny the enemy potential assets." I turned my massive form to face him, deliberately pointing my weapons away in a non-threatening manner. "They are not assets, brother. They are the Imperium. They are what we have sworn to defend, the humanity we have sacrificed our own to preserve." The Marine's augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on me. The mission parameters prioritize elimination of the Alpha Legion presence. These civilians present a tactical vulnerability. They could be possessed, corrupted, or used as living shields by the enemy. Then secure them and continue the advance. We do not kill those we are sworn to protect. Your logic is flawed, ancient one. Perhaps your cognitive systems require recalibration. After such extended service, before I could respond, and I was preparing a response. That would have been harsh. Thanatar's massive form stepped between us. "The Venerable Brother's wisdom spans centuries, young one. You would do well to heed it. Secure the civilians and continue the mission as ordered." The Marine stood his ground for a moment, clearly wanting to argue, but Thanatar was even older than I, even more venerable, and his authority could not be questioned. Finally, the Marine signaled 2 of his squad to escort the civilians to a designated safe zone farther behind our lines. As they moved away, the child looked back at me once more. This time there was something besides fear in those eyes. Perhaps gratitude, perhaps hope. Perhaps just the recognition that in a galaxy of horrors, some still fought for something beyond mere survival. The battle resumed its bloody course. We pushed toward the heart of the corruption, a massive temple the word-bearers had raised to their dark gods. The architecture defied every law of physics and sanity, angles that should have been impossible, surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with unholy life, sounds that were not sounds but direct assaults on consciousness itself. At the temple's center stood a chaos sorcerer. Unlike his brothers who wore the word-bearers' crimson armor, his ceramite was a riot of colors that shifted and changed as I watched, never settling on a single hue. Psychic energy crackled around him like lightning, and reality itself seemed to warp in his presence. A sorcerer, Thanatar voxed, a significant threat. Prepare for psychic assault. The sorcerer raised his staff, unleashing a wave of warp energy that caught one of the Iron Hand's tactical squads. Their armor provided no protection against this attack. I watched in horror as they twisted and changed, their flesh and metal melding and transforming until they were no longer recognizable as either human or machine. Their screams, merged, overlapping, eternal, would haunt me. I advanced immediately, my heavy flamer spewing promethium in a cleansing arc. The transformed Marines were consumed in holy fire, their suffering ended. It was a mercy, though it felt like murder. The sorcerer turned his attention to me, his face, or what passed for a face, twisting into a smile that contained too many teeth. "Ancient One," he said, his voice somehow cutting through the din of battle to reach me with perfect clarity. "How long has it been since you truly lived? Since you felt the beat of your heart? The breath in your lungs? The touch of another human being?" His words struck with more force than any physical blow could have. And suddenly, impossibly, I was experiencing sensations I had not felt in a millennium. The weight of a real body, muscles and bones and skin, the taste of food and drink, the warmth of the sun on my face, the embrace of battle brothers after victory, the simple pleasure of removing armor after a long campaign, feeling air against flesh. "I can give this back to you," the sorcerer promised, his voice honeyed with false compassion. "I can free you from your metal prison. All that is required is your service. Serve the true gods, and I will restore what the false emperor has taken from you. Life, sensation, humanity." For a moment, a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity, I hesitated. The sensations were so real, so achingly familiar. The memories of being truly alive rather than merely existing. Of being a man, not a weapon. Of having a future beyond the next battle. Then I saw the corrupted Marines, their forms twisted beyond all recognition, and I remembered the truth. Chaos offered nothing but lies and damnation. It could not restore what was lost. It could only corrupt what remained. The life it promised was not life but slavery. The sensations it offered were not real but illusions designed to trap the desperate. "I serve the Emperor," I replied, advancing through the psychic assault, through the false sensations and lying promises, in life and in death, and I will serve him still when the last star dies and the universe itself grows cold. "Your lies have no power over me, traitor." I fired my weapons, but the sorcerer deflected the shots with a contemptuous gesture. His power was formidable, fueled by the sacrifices the word-bearers had conducted throughout this corrupted city. Innocent blood shed in worship of dark gods now turned against their would-be saviors. Thanatar and Kratax joined me, the 3 of us forming a wedge of adamantium and ceramite, advancing against the sorcerer's reality-warping power. Around us, the remaining Iron Hands poured fire into the word-bearers who attempted to interfere, keeping our path clear. The sorcerer's attacks intensified. Reality warped around us in ways that defied description. Systems failed and reactivated seemingly at random. Warning runes flashed across my vision in patterns that made no sense. The very laws of physics seemed negotiable in his presence. Then, at a critical moment, Kratax faltered. His movements became erratic, his weapon systems firing wildly in all directions. Over the vox, I heard him cry out in a voice that was suddenly young, suddenly achingly human. "Brother Tullo, I remember you now. I remember your face." The sorcerer laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming children. "Yes, remember. Remember what you have lost. Remember what you can never regain. Remember in despair." Kratax's systems went completely haywire. His flamer discharged into the air, wasting precious promethium on empty sky. His power weapon scraped uselessly against the ground, tearing up chunks of corrupted stone. He was lost in memories, overwhelmed by the sorcerer's psychic assault, experiencing all at once centuries of loss and grief that had been kept at bay by the mercy of forgetting. I did the only thing I could. I positioned myself between Kratax and the sorcerer, absorbing the psychic attacks meant for my brother. Pain lanced through what remained of my organic components, false sensations of flesh being flayed from bone, of blood boiling in veins that no longer existed, of organs rupturing that had long since been replaced by mechanical substitutes. But I had learned something in my millennium of service. Pain is just information. It tells you where you are, what you are, that you exist. I embraced the pain, used it to anchor myself to reality, and continued to advance. One step, then another, then another. Thanatar circled to the right, drawing some of the sorcerer's attention. The remaining Iron Hands tactical squads provided covering fire, their bolters cutting down word-bearers who attempted to interfere. Together, we pressed the attack, refusing to yield despite the reality-warping horror arrayed against us. When I finally reached the sorcerer, his expression changed from confidence to concern. He raised psychic barriers, layers of warp energy that should have been impenetrable. My power fist, crackling with disruption energy, shattered them like glass. My second strike caught him in the chest, crushing ceramite and flesh and bone. As he died, the psychic assault faded, reality reasserting itself with a nauseating lurch. The corrupted temple began to collapse, its impossible architecture no longer sustained by warp energies. "Fall back," I ordered over the vox. "The structure is failing." The Iron Hands withdrew in good order, dragging their wounded with them, those who could still be saved. I moved to Kratax, who had regained control of his systems but was moving slowly. "Like one in a daze, brother," I said gently. "We must withdraw." "I remembered," he replied, his voice distant, wondering. For a moment I remembered everything. My life before the chapter, my brother who died during the implantation process, the campaigns we fought together, the brothers we lost, the oaths we swore. It was all there, perfect and complete, as clear as the day I lived it. Hold to those memories, brother, I cannot. Even now they're fading, slipping away despite my attempts to hold them, like trying to grasp smoke. In an hour, perhaps less, all I will remember is that I remembered something important. The details will be gone, dissolved back into the fog that clouds my past. There were no words of comfort I could offer, no wisdom that could ease his pain. So I simply stayed beside him as we made our way out of the collapsing temple, my presence a reminder that he was not alone in his suffering. Outside, the Iron Hands were already establishing a secure perimeter, preparing for possible counterattacks. The battle for this corrupted city would continue, but the heart of the word-bearer's presence had been destroyed. The mission, by the cold calculations of the chapter, had been a success. As Tech Marines approached to perform battlefield repairs and prepare us for the next phase of the campaign, I looked at Kratax. "Brother," I said quietly, "the memories may fade, but duty remains. Service remains. Is it enough?" he asked, the question cutting to the heart of our existence. Is duty alone enough reason to endure this half-existence? To persist in this state between life and death, experiencing only war, only violence, only the endless cycle of killing and being prepared to kill again? I had no answer that would comfort him. No wisdom gained from my millennium of service that could make the horror of our condition bearable, so I offered him the only truth I had found, inadequate though it was. It must be enough. It is all we have left. The campaign continued for weeks more. We purged the word-bearers present street by street, hab block by hab block, building by building. When it was finally complete, when the last corrupted structure had been cleansed with holy fire and the last traitor had been sent shrieking back to whatever hell had spawned them, we were returned to the strike cruiser. As the Tech Marines prepared us for suspension once more, I made a request that surprised even me. "Before you activate the suspension protocols," I said to the senior Tech Marine, I wish to address the chapter's assembled brothers. The tech marine paused in his work, confusion evident even through his expressionless helmet. For what purpose, Venerable One? To share wisdom gained through centuries of service. A partial truth, but enough to make him consult with his superiors via Vox. After a brief exchange, he turned back to me. Permission granted, Ancient One. The Iron Council has authorized your request. The surviving brothers from the campaign will be assembled in the Great Hall. I was brought to the ship's great assembly chamber, a vast space designed to hold hundreds of astartes. The Iron Hands stood in perfect formations, their augmented enhancements gleaming under the harsh lumens. They looked so different from the brothers I had once led. Yet they were still bound to me by shared gene seed, by common purpose, by the legacy of Ferrus Manus. Brothers of the Iron Hands, I began, my Vox emitter projecting my voice across the chamber with perfect clarity. I have served the chapter for over a millennium. I have witnessed the Imperium's glory and its darkest hours. I have fought the long war against chaos in all its forms. I have seen enemies come and go, species rise and fall, while we endure. They listened in respectful silence. These warriors who knew me only as a living relic, a weapon from their chapter's storied past. You are taught that the flesh is weak, that emotion is a vulnerability to be excised like a cancerous growth, that logic and cold efficiency are the ideals to which you should aspire. These teachings are not without merit. Our flesh is indeed weaker than our armor. Our emotions can be exploited by cunning enemies. Logic and efficiency win battles. I paused, gathering my thoughts, knowing that what I would say next bordered on heresy by the chapter's modern standards, yet it needed to be said. But remember this truth, which I have learned through countless battles across the span of centuries. We fight for humanity, not just for its survival, but for what makes it human. For its capacity to hope, to love, to sacrifice for others, not out of calculated self-interest, but from genuine compassion. If we abandon these things in ourselves, if we become nothing but machines of war, then we have already lost the most important battle, the battle for our own souls. Silence greeted my words. The assembled Marines stood motionless, their augmetic eyes fixed upon my massive form. Some, I sensed, were considering my words seriously. Others had already dismissed them as the malfunctioning logic of an ancient war machine. Then, slowly, deliberately, one of them stepped forward. It was the tactical Marine who had wanted to eliminate the civilians during our advance through the corrupted city. Venerable One, he said, his voice respectful but firm, your wisdom is noted and will be recorded in the chapter archives for future study. But with respect, the chapter has evolved since your time. We have found through bitter experience that emotion clouds judgment, that human connections create vulnerabilities our enemies can exploit, that mercy is a luxury we cannot afford in a galaxy that seeks our destruction. He gestured to his heavily augmented form. The Primarch himself sought to overcome the weaknesses of flesh. His silver hands were a testament to the superiority of iron over meat. We honor his memory by following his example, by making ourselves stronger through the rejection of weakness. The Primarch, I replied carefully, retained his humanity until the end, brother. He augmented his body to better serve mankind, not to reject it entirely. He stood with his brother Primarchs and felt genuine love for them. He fought alongside human armies and mourned their losses. He died defending the future of humanity. Not the abstract concept, but real humans, flesh and blood, with all their weaknesses and strengths. And where did that get him? Another voice called out from the formation. Dead on Istvan Fee, betrayed by a brother he loved. If he had been less trusting, less human, perhaps he would have seen Fulgrim's treachery before it was too late. The suggestion hung in the air like a blasphemy, though spoken with utter sincerity, that the Primarch's greatest flaw had been his humanity, his capacity for love and trust. Before I could formulate a response, the ship's admiral entered the chamber, his naval uniform crisp and perfect, his face a study in controlled displeasure. This philosophical debate must conclude, he announced with undisguised irritation. We have received an astropathic message. The Tyranid splinter fleet we believe destroyed 3 centuries ago has reappeared in the Gallian Nebula. All assets are being redeployed immediately. Battle stations in 30 minutes. And just like that, any impact my words might have had was lost in the sudden rush of preparations for the next war. The endless, eternal war that was the only constant in my fractured existence. As the assembled brothers broke formation and hurried to their duties, As the tech marines approached to prepare me for immediate redeployment rather than suspension, I wondered if anything I had said would be remembered. If any of these iron hands would reflect on the nature of their humanity in the quiet moments before battle, or if my words would be dismissed and forgotten. Just another data entry in the vast archives of the chapter. But then, as I was being loaded onto a transport for redeployment, Dion approached me one final time. "Ancient One," he said quietly, ensuring we were not overheard. "There were those in that chamber who heard your words and will remember them. Myself included. Seeds planted in fertile ground will grow even if the harvest is centuries away. And if the harvest never comes, if the chapter continues down this path until there is nothing left but machines that remember being human, then at least we tried," Dion replied simply. "And trying even in the face of certain failure is the most human thing of all." The next period of consciousness, for I could no longer think of them as simply awakenings, came without the usual gradual reactivation of systems. Instead, my awareness slammed back into full alertness with jarring suddenness, as if I had never been suspended at all. Warning runes flashed across my vision in urgent red. Emergency power was routing through backup systems. My weapons were powering up without the usual blessing rituals and consecrations. Something was very wrong. I was in a storage vault deep within what I recognized immediately as the fortress of Medusa's gaze on Medusa itself, the chapter's homeworld, in one of the oldest and most sacred structures of our order. Around me lay other dreadnoughts in various states of readiness. Some were already fully activated like myself, their weapons tracking potential threats with mechanical precision. Others were still in the process of awakening, their systems coming online one by one with agonizing slowness. Alarm klaxons blared through the massive chamber, their sound mixing with the distant thunder of explosions that reverberated through the ancient stone floor. We were under attack. The fortress itself was under siege. A tech marine I did not recognize rushed toward us, his armor badly scorched and damaged, one arm hanging limply at this side, sparks cascading from damaged servos. "Venerable brothers," he shouted over the cacophony of alarms and distant explosions. "The fortress is under attack. Iron Council instructions are to deploy all available assets in defense of the inner sanctum." "What enemy do we face?" demanded one of the other dreadnoughts, an ancient contemptor pattern whose sarcophagus bore decorations and battle honors I didn't recognize, suggesting service spanning millennia. "Word-bearers," the tech marine gasped, clearly wounded and struggling, a massive force led by the dark apostle Marduk. The name struck me like a physical blow. My weapon systems actually fluctuated, power surging briefly before I regained control. Marduk. Marduk the Faithless, the traitor who had dealt me my mortal wound on Tyrannus VII, whom I had killed with my power fist, crushing his skull and watching his brain matter splash across my armor, before succumbing to my own injuries. How could he be leading an attack now? I had killed him. A millennium ago I had ended his existence. How could he possibly be here? Before I could voice this impossibility, another explosion, closer this time, much closer, shook the chamber violently. Part of the ancient ceiling collapsed, massive stone blocks crashing down and crushing several iron hands beneath their weight. Through the gap in the ceiling poured corrupted servitors, their bodies twisted by the influence of chaos into obscene parodies of their original forms. Behind them came tech thralls, once human slaves now warped beyond recognition. And following them, word-bearers in crimson armor decorated with blasphemous symbols that hurt to look upon. Battle was joined immediately. The dreadnought surged forward to the forefront of the defense, our massive weapons cutting down waves of enemies. I fought with mechanical precision, centuries of warfare having honed my skills to a deadly edge that required no conscious thought. But as the battle progressed, as I cut down cultist after cultist, servitor after servitor, I found my perception beginning to shift in disturbing ways. The vault around me flickered like a pick screen with faulty connections. For brief moments it was replaced by a different battlefield entirely, a great plain of black glass beneath a burning sky. This was not the first time I had experienced such visions. The temporal displacement, as epistolary Varro had called it. But this time felt different. This time the vision did not pass quickly. Instead, the two realities seemed to overlap, creating a disorienting double image that made targeting difficult. I was fighting word-bearers in the chapter vault, my brothers beside me, the familiar weight of my weapons in my control, and simultaneously I was fighting on that nightmarish plane of black glass, battling enemies I couldn't quite focus on, warriors in armor that shifted between crimson and white, between the colors of word-bearers and something else entirely. A voice cut through my confusion, not from an external vox, but seemingly from within my own consciousness, clear, strong, authoritative. A voice I had never heard before with my own ears, yet recognized instantly. The loop tightens. The pattern becomes clear. I recognize that voice, though recognition made no logical sense. It belonged to the silver-handed giant I had glimpsed in my displaced memories. Farthest himself, the Primarch, dead for over 10,000 years, somehow speaking directly into my mind. What is happening to me? I demanded, even as I continued to fight in both realities simultaneously. My weapons cutting down enemies that existed in two places at once. Time is not as linear as mortals perceive it, the voice replied, calm and patient despite the chaos around me. For some, particularly those who exist in states between life and death, trapped in liminal spaces, the boundaries between moments can become permeable. Past, present, and future blur together. Am I going mad? Is this the cognitive dissolution Vero warned me about? No, you are remembering. And in remembering, you may break the cycle that has trapped you. Before I could question this cryptic statement, a word-bearer champion broke through the defensive line of iron hands, heading directly for me with single-minded purpose. He carried an axe that screamed with the voices of all it had killed, millions of tortured souls bound to the weapon, their agony fueling its power. Marduk the Faithless. Unchanged after all these centuries, the same warrior, the same weapon, the same malevolent intelligence burning in eyes that had seen the death of worlds. As he charged toward me, reality shifted violently. The vault disappeared entirely, replaced by the ashen plains of Tyrannus VII. I was no longer in my Dreadnought chassis, but standing in Terminator armor, leading my company against the word-bearer's corrupted cathedrals. And charging toward me was Marduk, exactly as he had been a millennium ago, his screaming axe raised high, his face twisted in fanatic fury. You have lived this moment countless times, said the voice of Farthest. In dreams you cannot remember, in memories that are not quite your own, in the spaces between awakening and battle. It is the pivot around which your existence turns, the anchor point that holds you in place. I killed him, I said, even as I prepared to meet Marduk's charge. My body. Bodies? Moving through familiar motions. I crushed his skull after he wounded me. This cannot be happening, and yet it returns. As do you, locked in an eternal moment, repeating endlessly. Neither of you can escape. Neither death nor life, but an endless cycle of the same instant played over and over across time. The axe swung toward me, following the exact trajectory I remembered from 1,000 years ago. I knew what would happen next. I had lived it before. I would raise my power fist to parry, deflect the blow just enough that it would wound but not kill me. Then I would crush Marduk's skull in retaliation, even as I fell to my knees, blood pooling beneath me. The pattern was set. The cycle was established. This was how it had happened. This was how it always happened. Break the cycle, urged the voice of the Primarch, suddenly urgent. Change the pattern. Step outside the loop that binds you. In that moment of perfect clarity, suspended between heartbeats, I understood. This was more than memory, more than temporal displacement or cognitive malfunction. This was a loop in reality itself, a moment that had somehow become trapped in endless repetition. Every time I awakened as a Dreadnought, every battle I fought, every century of service, all of it led inexorably back to this primal scene. My death and rebirth, the moment that defined my existence, the wound that never healed, the death that was never completed, the transition that remained eternally unfinished. Instead of parrying the axe as I had done countless times, in countless iterations of this moment, I made a choice. I stepped into the blow. The screaming blade bit deep into my armor, deeper than it had the first time, far deeper than it should have been able to penetrate. It severed vital systems, cut through layers of adamantium that should have been impenetrable, found the connections to my organic components and sheared through them with malicious precision. Pain flared through my consciousness, white-hot, all-consuming, more real than anything I had felt in centuries. True pain, Not the phantom sensations or diagnostic warnings I had grown accustomed to. Real, undeniable, overwhelming pain. But in that pain was something I had not felt for a millennium. The simple, profound reality of being fully present in a single moment. Of existing here and now, not scattered across time, not fragmented between past and future. Just here, just now, just this. Marduk's expression showed genuine surprise at my unexpected move. His eyes widened behind his helmet, confusion replacing the fanatic certainty that had burned there. This was not how it was supposed to happen. This was not the pattern. Before he could recover, before he could adjust his attack, my power fist connected with his chest, not his head, not the crushing blow to the skull that had killed him in the original encounter. This time I struck his torso, the disruption field tearing through his armor and into his flesh, but not killing him. Instead, I thrust him away with all the strength my damaged systems could muster, breaking the established pattern, changing the script that had been written 1,000 years ago. Reality wavered like heat shimmer over desert sands. Both the ashen plains of Tyrannus 7 and the chapter vault on Medusa became insubstantial, their solidity dissolving like parchment thinning to transparency. Through the dissolving realities, I glimpsed other moments, other times. Battles I had fought as a dreadnought across centuries, campaigns I had waged as a captain in my flesh life, moments from a life I barely remembered, experiences that might have been my own or might have belonged to other warriors who had occupied this sarcophagus before me. Deaths I had experienced countless times in countless variations. The boundaries between all these moments became permeable, translucent. I could see through them, see the connections between them, see the pattern they formed. A spiral, a loop, a trap constructed not by any enemy, but by my own inability to let go, to accept what had happened, to move forward. What is this? I demanded of the Primarch's voice, even as the multiple realities continued to shift and merge and separate around me like a kaleidoscope of existence.
What am I seeing?
The truth of your existence, came the reply, gentle but inexorable. You died on Tyrannus 7, Brother Captain Marin. But you did not become a dreadnought. That was not your fate. Then how am I here? How have I experienced centuries of war as a revenant in a sarcophagus? Because part of you could not accept death, could not relinquish duty, could not let go of the chapter, of your brothers, of the endless war that had defined your existence. Your soul, instead of returning to the Emperor as it should have, clung to the chapter, to the war, to the eternal cycle of battle and sacrifice that is the lot of every space marine. The realities around me began to stabilize, coalescing into a single scene. I stood on a great plain of glass, not the battlefield for my fragmented visions, but something different. Limitless in all directions, perfectly flat, reflecting the stars above like an infinite mirror. The sky was filled with more stars than I had ever seen, their light undimmed by atmosphere or distance. And before me stood Ferrus Manus, not as a vision or a memory, but seemingly solid and real. He appeared as he must have in life, a giant even among the transhuman Primarchs, his silver hands gleaming in the starlight, his face stern but not unkind, his presence radiating a power that was both terrible and comforting. Where am I? I asked, my voice, my real voice, not the mechanical approximation of a vox emitter, sounding strange to my own ears. A place between, the Primarch replied, his voice the same one that had guided me through the chaos. Between life and death, between memory and reality, between what was and what might be. A reflection of your own fractured perceptions, given form by the liminal state you have occupied for so long. And you? Are you real or merely a projection of my damaged mind? A hallucination created by failing systems? Ferrus Manus smiled slightly, an expression that somehow made him seem more human despite his divine nature. Does it matter? I am as real as anything in this realm of liminality, real enough to tell you what you need to know, real enough to offer you a choice that should have been offered long ago. I looked down at myself and realized with a shock that I no longer appeared as a dreadnought. I stood in my original body, the body I had worn before Tyrannus 7, before the wound, before everything. I was whole and undamaged, wearing the Terminator armor I had died in, but alive, vital, complete. I flexed my fingers, real fingers, not massive power fist gauntlets, and felt the sensation with crystal clarity. This was more than a vision. This was something else entirely. What choice do you speak of? I asked. The Primarch gestured and the glassy plain rippled. Images appeared in its reflective surface like scenes viewed through water. I saw myself, or the echo of myself, flitting between moments of war, inhabiting the perceptions of Iron Hand's dreadnoughts across time, experiencing fragments of their battles, their thoughts, their slow descent into machine logic. For centuries, for over a millennium, your soul has wandered between moments of war, Ferrus Manus explained. You have experienced fragments of battles fought by Iron Hands in dreadnought sarcophagi across time. You have inhabited their perceptions as they have occasionally channeled yours, the temporal displacement, the memories that are not your own. All of it has been you drifting through time, unable to fully die, unable to truly live. But it felt real, I protested. All of it felt real. The battles, the conversations, the centuries of service. It was real to you, the Primarch said gently. The experiences were genuine, even if they were not all your own. Through you, something of those other warriors has been preserved. Their perspective, their wisdom, their understanding of what the chapter was and what it has become. To what end? If I am merely a ghost, what purpose has this existence served? Perhaps to bring a message from the chapter's past to its present. A reminder of what the Iron Hands once were, before flesh became the enemy rather than merely the weakest part of a warrior's being. Before strength became confused with the absence of weakness. Before we forgot that the Emperor created us to protect humanity, not to transcend it. The images in the glassy plain shifted, showing me scenes I recognized from my recent experiences. The child in the corrupted city, looking up at me with fear and hope. My address to the assembled chapter, speaking truths that bordered on heresy, conversations with Dion about the old ways, small moments of humanity preserved in an increasingly inhuman chapter. And now, the Primarch continued, you have a choice. The choice that was denied you when you died on Tyrannus VII. What choice? To continue this fractured existence, flitting between moments of war like a ghost haunting ancient battlefields. Or to accept the death you earned honorably in service to the Emperor, and allow your soul to finally know the peace that has eluded you for over 1,000 years. The concept was almost incomprehensible after so long. Peace, true rest, an end to the eternal cycle of awakening, battle, and suspension, an end to the half-life I had experienced for so long that I had almost forgotten any other state of being. If what you say is true, I said slowly, trying to process the implications, then I have not truly lived for a millennium. I have been a phantom, experiencing the lives and deaths of other warriors who were interred in dreadnoughts. None of it was real. None of it mattered. It was real to you, Ferrus Manus repeated with quiet emphasis. The experiences were genuine. The emotions were true. The wisdom you gained was earned through suffering and service, no less valid for the unusual nature of your existence. And it has mattered. Perhaps more than you know. He gestured again, and the images shifted to show Iron Hands I recognized. Dion preserving ancient traditions in secret, Varro the librarian, protecting those who questioned the chapter's path. Young battle brothers choosing mercy over efficiency, humanity over cold logic. Small changes, subtle shifts, seeds planted that might one day grow into something greater. Your words, your example, your presence, even as a ghost, even scattered across time, have influenced them, reminded them of something they were in danger of losing entirely. That influence will continue, ripples spreading outward through the chapter's future. And if I choose peace, if I finally accept death, then your soul will return to the Emperor as it should have done centuries ago. Your long service will end. You will take your place among the honored dead, and you will know the rest you have earned many times over. The prospect was tempting beyond words. To be free of this fractured existence, to complete the journey that had been interrupted on Tyrannus VII, to finally, after so long, simply rest. But even as the temptation pulled at me, I thought of the Iron Hands I had left behind, of Dion and his quiet rebellion against the chapter's transformation, of Kratax losing his memories bit by bit, of the young brothers who still struggled to maintain their humanity in the face of doctrine that demanded they reject it. And if I choose to remain, I asked, if I refuse this peace you offer? The Primarch's expression became grave. Then you condemn yourself to continued suffering, to existing in this liminal state, caught between life and death, experiencing only fragments of time. It is not a choice I would recommend, brother. You have earned your rest, but the work is not finished. The chapter still struggles with the legacy of your death, with the interpretation of your teachings. If I leave now, who will remind them of what they were? Who will whisper in their dreams of the old ways when flesh and iron existed in balance? Others will come. Other voices. The chapter's path is not yours alone to guide. Perhaps not, but it is mine to influence if I choose. You said yourself that my presence has mattered, that my words have had effect. How can I abandon that when there is still so much work to be done? Ferrus Manus studied me for a long moment, something like sadness in his eyes. You would choose continued suffering over earned rest? Would sacrifice your own peace for the possibility, not the certainty, but merely the possibility of guiding the chapter toward a better path? Is that not what you taught us? That duty comes before comfort? That we serve not for reward, but because service itself is worthy? I taught you to value your humanity even as you enhanced it, to remember what you fought for even as you grew beyond normal human limitations. I did not teach you to martyr yourself unnecessarily. And yet you charged Fulgrim on Istvan V, knowing it would likely mean your death. You could have withdrawn, regrouped, lived to fight another day. But you charged anyway because it was what the moment demanded. The Primarch's expression shifted. Was that pride? Sorrow? Some combination of both? You use my own example against me, brother captain, very well. If this is truly your choice, if you fully understand what you are choosing, then I will not stand in your way. But know this, the path you choose is a hard one. Harder than any battle you have fought. You will exist in a state of eternal incompletion. Never fully alive, never fully dead. You will watch centuries pass in moments. You will see brothers you come to care for live and die before you can truly know them. And always, always there will be the temptation to simply let go, to accept the peace that waits for you. I understand. Do you? Truly? The Primarch's voice became stern, almost harsh. This is not like your existence up to now, scattered and unconscious of your true nature. If you choose this path, you will be fully aware of what you are. A ghost, an echo, a memory that refuses to fade. That awareness will be its own torment. I understand, I repeated, and I choose to remain. For as long as my guidance might serve some purpose. For as long as there are brothers who need reminding of what the Iron Hands once were and could be again. Ferrus Manus nodded slowly, acceptance and resignation in the gesture. A final sacrifice worthy of the Iron Hands, duty unto death and beyond. Very well, brother Captain Marin. Your choice is made. He raised one silver hand and the glassy plane began to shimmer and shift. But know this choice is not irrevocable. When you believe your purpose is fulfilled, when you have imparted what wisdom you can, when the burden becomes too great to bear, the path to peace will remain open to you. I will be here waiting when you are ready to finally rest. I understand, and thank you, my Primarch, for giving me the choice. It was always yours to make, brother. I merely clarified what was already true. Now go. Return not to a single time or place, but to the spaces between moments, to the dreams of your brothers who still live, to the memories of the honored dead, to the quiet hours when ancient Dreadnoughts stand in silent vigil, their machine spirits receptive to whispers from beyond. The glassy plain began to dissolve around me, the stars above fading like morning mist in sunlight. Ferrus Manus's form grew translucent, his silver hands the last thing to fade from view. His final words reached me through the gathering darkness. The flesh may be weak, brother, but the spirit endures. In that truth lies the real strength of the Iron Hands, remember that. And help them remember it too. Then I was adrift again, consciousness dissolving into formlessness, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. But this time was different. This time I moved with purpose rather than confusion. This time I understood what I was and what I needed to do. I sought out the dreamers, the questioners, those who maintained some spark of humanity beneath their mechanical enhancements and cold logic. I found Dion in the depths of the forge, working alone in the small hours of ship's night. He was reading from an ancient text, one of the forbidden records from before the Primarch's death. I whispered to him, not words exactly, but impressions, memories, feelings of how Ferrus Manus had truly been. Not the cold icon of strength the chapter had made him, but a warrior who had laughed with his brothers, who had valued loyalty and love alongside power and efficiency. Dion looked up sharply, glancing around the empty forge as if he had heard something. He had, in a way, not with his ears but with something deeper. He returned to his reading, but I could sense the subtle shift in his understanding. the connections forming in his mind. I found Kratax in suspension, his consciousness dormant but not entirely absent. I flowed through the spaces in his memories, the gaps where his past had been worn away by centuries. I could not restore what was lost, that was beyond my power, but I could remind him of what remained. That he had been loved once, that he had loved in return, that his service, however he remembered it or didn't, had meaning. When he next awakened, he would not remember my touch. But perhaps he would feel less alone in his confusion. Perhaps the weight of his forgotten past would seem slightly more bearable. I found young Iron Hands fresh from their scout companies, still adapting to their full augmentations, still wrestling with the chapter's doctrine that demanded they view their enhanced flesh as weakness to be overcome. I whispered to them in their dreams, showed them visions of Iron Hands from ages past who had been both strong and human, powerful and compassionate, enhanced and yet fundamentally humane. Some dismissed these dreams as processing artifacts, their brains sorting through the day's experiences. But others, a precious few, woke with questions, with doubts about the absolute certainty of current doctrine, with a hunger to know more about the chapter's history, to understand what had been lost along the way. And I found the oldest dreadnoughts, those ancient warriors who, like me, existed in fragments scattered across time. I could not communicate with them as I could with the living. They were too far gone into their own temporal displacement, their own fractured existence. But I could exist alongside them in the spaces between moments, could share the burden of eternal service, could offer the comfort of presence if not communication. In those long vigils, standing guard in the darkness of suspension vaults, I learned I was not alone. There were others like me, echoes of warriors whose souls lingered close to their chapter, unable or unwilling to complete their journey to final rest. We were few, scattered across time and space, but we were there, guardians of memory, keepers of wisdom, ghosts who chose duty over peace. Months passed, years, decades. Time had little meaning in my new state, flowing in strange patterns that no longer followed linear progression. Sometimes I would spend what felt like hours whispering wisdom to a single brother, only to discover that mere seconds had passed in the material world. Other times I would drift for what seemed like moments, only to find that centuries had elapsed. But gradually, slowly, I began to see change in the chapter. Small changes at first. Individual brothers making choices that honored both strength and humanity. Officers showing mercy not out of weakness but from genuine understanding that efficiency without compassion was ultimately self-defeating. Tech Marines preserving old traditions alongside new innovations. Then larger shifts. Dion and his faction, no longer quite so hidden though still discreet, began to influence chapter doctrine through careful argument and historical precedent. They did not reject augmentation or the pursuit of strength, but they advocated for balance, for remembering that they were enhanced humans, not machine emulations. There was resistance, of course. The more extreme members of the chapter viewed any retreat from total machine logic as weakness, as betrayal of the Primarch's legacy. Debates that had simmered for centuries came to the fore. The chapter was divided, more openly now, between those who embraced total augmentation and those who sought balance. But division was not necessarily weakness. Sometimes disagreement led to growth, to examination of assumptions, to the rediscovery of truths that had been forgotten or deliberately obscured. And through it all, I whispered, I reminded. I bore witness to the chapter's struggles and offered what guidance I could from my unique perspective, neither fully of the past, nor entirely in the present, but existing in the spaces between, where wisdom from ages gone could still illuminate the path forward. I do not know how long I have existed in this state. Time has lost all meaning when you exist between moments rather than within them. Has it been centuries since I made my choice on that glassy plain with Ferrus Manus? Millennia? Does it matter? The chapter continues to evolve. The debate between the factions continues, sometimes fierce, sometimes nearly violent, but always contained within the bonds of brotherhood and shared purpose. Perhaps that is all I could have hoped for. Not a simple answer, but an ongoing conversation. Not certainty, but the willingness to question. Sometimes in my moments of doubt, and there are many such moments, I return to that glassy plain. Not to speak with Ferrus Manus again, for he appears to me only that once, but to contemplate the stars reflected in its perfect surface. To remind myself that even the smallest light can be seen across unimaginable distances. That wisdom once gained is never truly lost. That influence, however subtle, ripples outward through time in ways we cannot predict or control. And to remember that the offer remains open, that when I am finally ready, when I have done what I can and given what I have to give, the path to peace will still be there. Waiting. Patient. Eternal. But not yet. Not while there are still brothers who need reminding of what they were and what they might be again. Not while the chapter still struggles to find balance between its drive for strength and its need for humanity. Not while I can still serve, even in this strange liminal way. This, then, is what it means to live forever inside a Space Marine dreadnought. Not the physical reality of an enhanced warrior interred in a walking sarcophagus, though that existence has its own harsh truths. Not the simple horror of becoming a weapon maintained and stored between battles. Not the tragedy of time passing in fragments, life experienced only in moments of violence. No, this is the experience of one whose soul could not let go, who lingered between life and death by choice, not by accident, who witnesses the slow evolution of his chapter across ages that have no meaning to him, who experiences eternity not as endless time but as timeless endurance. It is to exist between moments, between heartbeats of history, to watch brothers live and die in what seems like an instant from my fractured perspective, to see enemies rise and fall like waves against an adamantine shore, eternal in their threat yet temporary in their manifestation. To witness the slow drift of the chapter away from its origins and then, slowly, so slowly, to see it begin the journey back toward balance. It is a strange immortality. Neither the blissful eternity promised by imperial creed nor the final peace of oblivion, neither life nor death, but something else entirely. Purpose without end, duty beyond death, service that transcends the limitations of flesh and time itself. And perhaps, when that purpose is finally fulfilled, when my wisdom has been fully imparted, when the chapter has found its way back to the path Ferrus Manus intended, when the work is truly done, I will at last know the peace that has eluded me for so very long. My soul will return to the Emperor. I will take my place among the honored dead of the chapter. My long watch finally ended. I will rest. But until then, until that distant day I cannot foresee and may never arrive, I remain a whisper in the darkness between battles, a memory of what once was and what might be again, guardian of ancient wisdom in an age that has forgotten much of value in its relentless march forward, a ghost who chose duty over rest, service over peace, eternal vigilance over earned reward. I am Brother Captain Marin of Clan Rayon, 5th Company, Iron Hands Chapter. My flesh died 1,000 years ago on a battlefield of ash, my body consigned to flames, my name recorded in the rolls of the honored dead, but my duty continues, for the Emperor, who gave us purpose, for humanity, which we were created to defend, for the soul of the chapter, which must never forget what it means to be both strong and human, for Ferrus Manus, who understood that true strength comes not from the absence of weakness but from the courage to acknowledge it and overcome it, forever, or until forever ends. And the flesh may be weak, as we have always known, but the spirit endures. In that truth lies our real strength. In that truth I remain, always watching, always remembering, always whispering wisdom to those who can still hear it, between the battles, between the moments, between life and death, forever between, forever vigilant, forever iron hands.